Serious. What's something creepy that has happened to you that you still occasionally think about to this day? Part 3. Please like and subscribe to support this channel. When my friend and I were 17, we used to work in a Pizza Hut together. We were closing up one weekend, so it was about 11 p.m. by the time we shut down and were ready to lock up. When we walked out to her car, there was an old lady sitting in her front passenger seat. My friend opened the driver door and asked the old lady before getting in, "Can I help you?" The old lady said, "I just need a ride home," so we tell her that we just have to go back inside and call our moms to tell her we'll be late. We go back inside the store and lock the door and call the police. Within 10 minutes the police are there arresting her. Turns out it was actually a 47-year-old man dressed up as an old lady. They found drugs and a knife on his body. When I was in the early years of secondary school, probably 12 to 14-ish, my mom asked me to take a bag of sugar over to my elderly neighbor's house as she'd lent us some sugar the previous weekend. Being a bit bratty, I didn't want to take it as I didn't feel like interacting with anyone. But I took it anyway. Stood at my neighbor's front door, timber frame, frosted glass panel in the middle, and knocked. Saw her walking down the hallway to the door and decided that I really didn't feel like chatting. So rude of me, but anyway. So I put the bag of sugar on the doorstep and legged it back to my house. Obviously didn't say anything to my mom about leaving without talking to the neighbor. 3 days later, my neighbor pops round to our house and asks if we noticed anything strange around her house in the last couple of days. Naturally my mom says, "Oh, honeybee went and dropped the sugar to you. I thought you'd have spoken then." So I was caught out and had to explain that I'd rudely dropped the sugar and essentially ding-ding. In my teens and early 20s, my best friend and I used to have lots of sleepovers. His mom worked the night shift as a nurse and his little brother usually stayed in his room and went to bed early, so we had the house for ourselves. We'd cook, eat dinner together, watch TV and especially talk a lot. We also had a tradition that we called night walks. Always around 11 p.m. or midnight, we'd leave the house and go for a long walk, 2 to 3 hours. It was especially nice in the summer because the air was warm but there was a coolish breeze and the fields and pastures smelled amazing. There was one particular route we walked very often. Towards the end of it, there was a big forest that we had to cross, and when we emerged from it, we were on a hill that overlooked the city. There was a bench and sometimes we sat down to enjoy the silence, the distant lights and to relax a bit before going downhill and home again. One time we did exactly this. Walking through the forest was always a bit scary in the middle of the night, so once we got out, my friend suggested to rest on that bench for a few minutes. We left the trail, walked 20 meters across a meadow and finally got to the bench. The bench was located in a place where it was surrounded by trees and bushes, except in the front where you had a great view. We sat there for maybe 20 to 25 minutes, had a smoke and just talked about random stuff like space and philosophy. At one point my friend remarked that he was getting cold because this happened in late fall, October or November, so we decided to get going and walk home again. When we were almost back to the trail, my friend asked me if I had brought the lighter. I told him that I thought he had picked it up. We turned around and went back to the bench. For a while we just kind of touched around on the wooden surface but couldn't find it. Since this spot was mostly surrounded by trees, it was very dark. My friend took out his phone and turned on the flashlight to find the lighter. He waved the flashlight around. And that's when we saw him. There was a guy sitting right behind the bench. Like, maybe 2 meters, 6 feet. He was completely dressed in black and sat there, motionless, on the cold, wet ground just staring at us. We hadn't heard any noise, which means he must have sat there for the entire time while we were sitting on the bench, just staring at the back of our heads. That alone is super creepy to think about still today. Of course my friend and I both got really startled and my friend said something like, "Holy shit man, you almost gave us a heart attack, haha. What the hell are you doing there?" But the guy didn't respond to anything. For a while we just stared at him confused and he stared back at us. Then I asked, "Why are you sitting there on the ground?" No response. My friend asked, "Are you alright?" Still no response. It was a really surreal situation but something about it didn't feel good. I can't say what, but something about that guy gave me a really bad feeling in my stomach. My friend later told me that he had felt the same way. Suddenly, the guy got up and began to walk towards us. I said, "Oh, what's happening?" And now the guy answered, but all he said was, "Yeah." As he walked around the bench to come towards us, I felt my friend's hand grab my coat and pull me backwards. He quietly said, "Let's get the fuck outta here, man." We walked a few steps backwards because we didn't want to turn our back on the guy. Then we turned around, ran back to the trail and another 100 meters. When we turned around, we were relieved to see the guy hadn't come after us, but we still walked home as quickly as possible. To this day I don't know why the hell that guy was sitting there, who he was, why he was silently staring at us for almost half an hour, what he planned to do when he got up and walked towards us, etc. All I can say is that my gut feeling tells me it was the right decision to run away rather than wait to find out. In my dorm room I heard the very distinct noise of those slider volume knobs on an iHome. If you know what the term is, help assist out. As far as I know, this sound is not often or easily replicated by something else. I can't think of anything that makes that sound. I was alone and it happened only once. So I was like, and didn't think anything of it until the next day I checked my mail and had received a card from a person who previously went to my childhood church. That's a whole different offshoot of creepy, but I digress. To provide a bit of context, this individual and I had rarely spoken directly. I had no connection aside from attending the same church years ago a while back for maybe 2 to 3 months. Childhood time is a foreign concept. This person was also a registered sex offender. Now for the punchline. The card read, "Have things gone bump in the night yet?" That's it. That's all it said. What? I grew up on a cattle ranch in a once rural town. Our house sat alone in the middle of a 200-acre plot of land, surrounded by a few small neighborhoods and some other small farms. There was a pasture light just outside the yard, visible from the living room. As a kid and teen I had a habit of waking up in the middle of the night and randomly walk through the house to check that the windows and doors were closed. It was the 90s in a small town. We didn't always lock our doors. It was just a routine thing I did to help me get back to sleep. My dad is the same way. Anyway, when I was about 14 I was doing my checks, in the middle of the night, and I look out the window at the pasture light and there, bathed in blue light, was a lone man. Just standing and staring at the house. I froze for a moment, then ducked down below the windowsill, hoping he didn't see me too. I only waited for a few seconds and peeked out again, but he was gone. I told my dad and he just nonchalantly shrugged it off and said that people will walk across our pastures all the time since we were in between two major roadways, mostly homeless or locals without cars. You can bet I started making sure the doors were locked as well after that. Two of us driving together, stopped to fill gas late at night. The gas station was closed. Beautiful summer night. I stepped away from the car to take the pup over to a grassy spot since we were stopped. Cute 20-something girl who was driving with me was filling up the car and standing illuminated by the lights over the pumps. Lone car comes tearing past on the road and suddenly does a screeching turn into the station and stops next to our car, opposite side of the pump. Very large guy, reddish beard, mid to late 20s, is already out of the car and halfway between the pumps, moving toward her when he sees me returning to the car, with the dog. He freezes in place staring at me. There was another guy who looked like his twin, sitting tense behind the wheel of their still running car and also staring. Neither of them moved a muscle after they saw me. They were not scared, very tense. Undecided, maybe. The whole incident happened fast. We both got into our car and drove away. They were 100% planning something unspeakable. Be careful out there, people. I was alone by myself on a motorbike in a rural area of Cambodia in 1996. Back when the Khmer Rouge were still actively hunting down foreigners and offering bounties to any local villager that could capture one. Me being an America white guy, the first thought I was invincible. When I had stopped to enjoy the view for a few minutes, a logging truck had passed right past me, with logs in the back, and when they passed me I could see a group of men in the cab with their eyes all lit up. Just as they passed me they slammed on the brakes and came to a complete halt. That's when I started up my motorbike quicker than I've ever done before and flew out of there like a bat out of hell. I looked back and the truck was slowly trying to turn around but couldn't really do it because the road was too narrow. And that's the last I ever saw of them. Had a recurring dream in my late teens and well into my 20s about an older dude that was always wearing military uniforms. Mostly it was an all-white uniform, but sometimes olive or brown and at least once camo. He never said anything to me even if I would try to engage him or ask him questions, just kind of looked at me and smiled. I can recall 5 different dreams he was in, but there may have been more. Kind of a short, stocky guy, white hair, clean-shaved face, just a calm demeanor. I haven't dreamed of him in over 10 years, but I still wonder what the hell that was all about. When my grandparents passed away, my family moved into their house to help take care of my uncle, who was slightly special needs, and had lived there his whole life. I got a lot of creepy vibes in that house, and had a lot of nightmares while living there. One evening, I had the worst nightmare ever that was super realistic. Towards the end of the dream, I saw the scariest demon smiling at me with the blackest black eyes, or lack of, more like emptiness, hundreds of razor-sharp teeth curled into a smile, and strange cracked white skin, almost like bone. The demon somehow conveyed to me that he was going to murder me just by smiling at me. This nightmare made me not want to sleep for weeks out of fear of seeing this thing again. I did not tell my family about this dream. I did not get along with this uncle who we lived with, and I rarely spoke to him unless completely necessary. The next day after that nightmare, he asked me a question. He said, "Hey, do you still have that app on your phone?" The app he was referring to was some stupid phone app for reading EMF. I downloaded the app just for shits and giggles a few weeks prior because, as I said, the house was creepy and I tried to see if I could pick up any messages from ghosts or demons in the home. I told him, "Yeah, I still have it." "Why?" He said, "Oh, I was just wondering because last night I saw something standing at my doorway." And then proceeded to describe the exact demon from my nightmare. I was so freaked out I don't even think I properly responded to him. I told my family about this, and they agreed that something was in the house. None of us slept well the rest of our time there. Luckily, we didn't live in that house for very long before selling it. I still think about that demon from my dreams sometimes and hope I never encounter that smile again. Also, there's no way my uncle could have known what I dreamt, because like I said, I didn't tell my family about the dream. I fully believe that he saw the same demon in person that I saw in my nightmare. I've never and still really don't believe in the paranormal. However, my grandparents died within a couple of weeks of each other, so we had a double funeral. After the funeral, all the family went back to my grandparents' house just as they had left it. After a few hours, people were drunk and began to argue about pointless bullshit. When the argument came to a head, the lights all of a sudden dimmed and flashed a few times as if a power surge. It stopped the arguing immediately. I can't help but think it was my grandparents saying, "Cut it out," from beyond the grave. My family moved to Indianapolis when I was in 2nd grade. At one point I was watching TV and a weather alert popped up that showed the radar in different shades of green for the amount of rain and tornado danger areas. I looked outside and the sky was the same fieing shade of green as the weather radar. Subsequent winds shook the hell out of the house, and I was convinced a tornado was going to atomize the house. Probably mundane as hell for someone born in Tornado Alley, but creeped the hell out of me. So this one time I was out hunting, northern BC, on my own. I'm on my quad going down an old trail and I come to the edge of a pond and I look down and there's a bone. Nothing unusual. Then I look a bit further, deer skull. No biggie. Well, I keep looking and there's bone set after bone set. I counted at least 20 separate sets, along with 2 fresh carcasses. I was in the middle of this boneyard, it's dead silent, and I get this spidey sense that something was watching me. I load my rifle and sit and wait a few minutes, but there's nothing. Seriously, the most eerie feeling. I later found out it was most likely a cougar's kill site, and given them amount of bones it was big and effective. My family and I stayed in Michigan 1 year with my aunt and uncle, who lived there for a short time. It was along a bay, with no super close neighbors but rental houses within eyeshot. It was a really nice house, but felt off. I wasn't the only one who felt it. My entire family did. The first night, there was a rental house that had no visitors that week, according to the landlord. But my mom swore she watched lights flicker on and off several times when she couldn't sleep one night and got up around 2 to 3 a.m. Another night, my oldest sister was asleep on an inflatable mattress in the guest room my parents were in. My middle sister and I were on 2 other mattresses right outside the door in the upstairs game room type area. My dad hightailed it out of there and decided to sleep in our RV because he said he felt weird in the house and couldn't relax. Once again, my mom woke up around 2 to 3 a.m., but because someone was at the side of her bed saying, "Mom, Mom, Mom," over and over again like one of us kids were trying to wake her up. She woke up and said, "What?" but no one was there. She woke my oldest sister up and asked what she needed. My oldest sister was dead asleep and said she had been all night. She checked on my middle sister and I, and we were also sound asleep. Neither of us had gotten up all night. I think we ended up cutting the trip short and deciding to explore the surrounding town and staying in a hotel instead of staying there another night. My aunt and uncle moved soon after. My family still often references how creepy that house was, but no one has an explanation for what happened. I went to BJ's on a weekday night, and when I went to the back of the store to get pork chops, there was a man there. He wasn't looking for anything, it felt like he was waiting for his prey. As I moved closer to the pork chops, he tried to get his cart between me, my cart, and a pallet of boxes to be unloaded. I grabbed what I needed and maneuvered around him as quickly as I could. He looked displeased, not mad, just displeased. He proceeded to slowly follow me through the store. I paid and hustled my ass to my car, checking over my should to see if he followed me out and would see my car. I drove a long way home in case I was followed. It seems minor, but God, when your gut hits you like that, you just listen and move. Woke up next to a woman twice my age that I have never met before. I was quite shaken up by it, and she harassed me for a while after. Sadly, male victims of rape don't really exist in most people's minds. When I told friends, then, I got a lot of jokes about the scratch on my head. Evidently I had fallen that night, again, no recollection. So of course the story goes she clobbered me on the side of the head and had her way with me. I've never gone to shot night at the bar since. Still fucks with me anytime I see the woman around. I still work in the service industry, and years later she sat down at one of my tables. I had to pass it off on someone else. Once I was walking home from the bar, crossing a local park. Got the most Law and Order SVU fear feeling. No other way to describe it. Immediately turned around and proceeded to get shit-faced waiting for someone to walk me home because I was not going to go back through there alone. Later on, a serial rapist was found to have targeting my neighborhood for years. Saw his picture later and realized I'd met him before. He'd been asking for tips about the neighborhood because he was thinking about moving there after a divorce. Last 2 attacks before he was finally caught on a security camera or something were on my block. I live first floor. I think about it all the time. Not as much for me, but how fucked up it was that he was preying on local women for so long and there was DNA evidence. Just untested and lost until one woman fought about it. System is messed up and the world is scary. Our neighbor is notoriously known for having frequent fights, so frequent that almost every night you'd hear them screaming their lungs out at each other. One night I was outside minding my own business and I heard them starting another fight. I rolled my eyes in the first few minutes as it was about the husband being drunk again. Few more minutes pass, they then started throwing stuff around their house. A few more minutes pass, I heard the wife ask a question angrily. "You did what?" she yelled. Now I just assumed that the husband did something really bad that must have pissed off the wife. Everything beyond that were more inaudible voices, so I didn't exactly see the entire picture of their fight, not until the wife started screaming in fear. She started yelling, "Get away from me," and, "Let me go." I started to become concerned as the screams continued and thought I should call the cops. But apparently someone did it first, so a police car pulled over in front of their house. I assumed it was a noise complaint from another neighbor. When the police came to inspect, the fighting and yelling completely stopped. I thought it was over. A few days later, after I came back from school, I saw 3 police cars in front of their house. I saw the man in cuffs and was arrested. At first I assumed that the wife had reported his husband for domestic violence. As I got into our house, my parents were looking through the window and I asked them what was going on. My mom said that she heard from a fellow neighbor of ours that the man had murdered his wife and chopped her up. I was completely shocked and also creeped out by the news. More so when our local news on the TV had a report about it. The man had apparently hid the body parts in their washer room and covered it powdered soap. It was shocking knowing that I lived next to a psychopath. Although it does make it a good story to tell in a group of friends, but it still creeps the shit out of me. I sometimes would imagine if the guy went on a rampage. It was literally the closest I got to a real-life horror movie. 2 important notes to make before the creepy instance. 1. Closing parenthesis. We lock our 3 cats out of our bedroom at night because they get loud, annoying when they want attention, to the point that they wake up our baby. Baby sleeps in her crib in our room. We always do a head count before bed to make sure that they're all out of the bedroom to save us from getting back up to kick one out. 2. Once in a while, one of the cats will slip into our bedroom closet in the daytime when we open the door to grab a shirt or something, and they'll get locked in until we hear them scratching, crying, banging against the inside of the closet door. Scary event. One night when my spouse and I were in bed and about to fall asleep, we hear something banging against our closet door. I ask him if he did the head count before coming to bed, and he confirmed that he did and could have sworn all 3 cats were in the living room. We're both immediately kind of creeped out. My spouse gets out of bed and opens the closet door. Nothing is there. He leaves the bedroom to check the rest of our apartment, and all the cats were curled up together on the living room couch. He returns and checks the closet again, just in case we mysteriously got a rat or something. But there was nothing there. After he came back to bed, we cuddled up and were about to fall asleep again, only to be jolted up by a louder, longer banging against the closet door. At that point, we're both ready to shit ourselves. We both get up and thoroughly search the closet together. There's nothing. I get the baby back to sleep. The banging was so loud it woke her up. We get back to bed practically intertwined because we're creeped out, but we're also so exhausted that we start to fall asleep again. But of course, what happens once again is we're just about to fall asleep. More banging against the closet door. It's a little lighter this time, but now the doorknob is rattling too. Neither my spouse or I move. I whisper to him, should we just stay in bed and hope for the best? Out of pure exhaustion, he said yes. Despite being scared, I'm still beyond tired, and in my sleepy haze I look towards our closet and sternly whisper, this needs to stop. Now. We are tired and we're going to sleep. After that we fell asleep and there were no more disturbances. There haven't been any major activity since then either. Some occasional odd sounds and concerning shadows out of the corners of our eyes, but nothing major like that night. A few years ago, I was wondering about a guy the first used to work with, who was painfully shy. I was the only person he talked to, outside of his family. Glancing at the clock, I felt guilt that I'd not kept in touch since I left that job, 10 years before. No idea why he comido mind. But when I read the obituaries that day, I saw that he had passed away. His burial was at the exact moment that he came into my mind. We've always had weird things in our house, small stuff we can't explain. Well, the entrance to our attic is in my room and it's the only entrance in there. Me and my mom are both night owls and seem to stay up pretty late sometimes. One night I had went to bed early but woke up to the sound of 3 claps coming from our attic at 3 a.m. I told my parents about this in the morning and they just kind of laughed and shrugged it off, didn't really believe me. Next night comes around and my mom was awake when it happened again, 3 claps at 3 a.m. It woke me up that night too, but paranormal, things like that I typically just shrug off if it keeps happening. Kind of telling whatever it is that I don't care really. Just don't hurt me lol, so I ended up going right back to sleep. My mom told me she heard it too the second night and believed me then. We store all of our holiday things up there, so I'm in the attic fairly often. Nobody is living up there. To this day we talk about it and still can't explain it. It never happened other than those 2 nights and nothing else has happened since then. Maybe it was telling us goodbye or something, I dunno. When I was about 9 or 10 years old, my grandma took me to my cousin's Saturday football game. I left my Game Boy in the truck and asked her to come with me to get it. She told me no, and that I would be fine to get it myself. I said okay, and walked to the parking lot. I grabbed my Game Boy from the truck, and as soon as I closed the door to the truck and turned around, there was a tall middle-aged man standing about 20 feet from me staring at me. I looked at him for a few seconds, and then he raised his right hand and started shaking his pointer finger side to side in the no fashion while he shook his head and clicked his tongue. After he did that, he lunged and started chasing me. I weaved in and out of cars until I found an opening in the fence that lined the parking lot. I ran back to the game and told my grandma while hysterically crying. Her and a few football dads went to the parking lot and couldn't find the man. I don't even want to wonder what would have happened to me if that man caught me. I still think about it, unfortunately.